They say the most dangerous things in the world are the ones you never see coming. In December of 1917, a ship entered a crowded harbour. She looked ordinary. She was slow, rusty, and painted a dull, lifeless grey. She carried no flag to warn of her cargo. She gave no sign that she was, in fact, the deadliest object on the face of the earth. To the city waking up on the shoreline, she was just part of the background scenery of the Great War. But beneath her steel decks, a chemical nightmare was already sweating in the cold. A bureaucratic system had decided that secrecy was more important than safety, and a single mistake was about to prove them wrong. This is not just the story of an explosion. You may know the statistics, the force, the death toll, the shockwave. But today we are going to walk the deck in those final terrifying minutes. We are going to sit with the sailors who knew the end of the world was coming and who screamed a warning that no one understood. So, find a quiet place, pour a drink, and join me as we peel back the layers of history to reveal the human cost of the Halifax explosion. This is the story of the ship that erased a city. The water is black before the sun hits it. It is the deep, unforgiving cold of the North Atlantic in December, a cold that seeps through steel hulls and wool coats, settling into the marrow of the bone. On the morning of December 6, 1917, the harbour of Halifax is not sleeping. It never really sleeps anymore. It is a living, breathing creature of the Great War, a massive, industrial heart pumping blood and iron toward the battlefields of Europe. At the mouth of the harbour, waiting for the submarine nets to open, sits a vessel that looks remarkably ordinary. She is the Mont-Blanc, a tramp steamer, painted grey, rusty in places. She sits low in the water, heavy, sluggish, unpretentious. To an observer standing on the rocky shore, shivering in the early frost, she looks like just another merchant ship, perhaps carrying grain to the starving French populace, or coal to keep the lights on in London. She looks harmless. She looks like a part of the background, a smudge of charcoal against the grey horizon. But this is the deception. This is the lie that the system tells to protect itself. Because the Mont-Blanc is not carrying grain. She is not carrying coal. She is not carrying lumber or textiles or mail. She is a floating bomb. She is, quite literally, the most dangerous object ever to float upon the ocean up to this point in human history. And she is entering a crowded harbour on a foggy morning with no red flag flying from her mast to warn anyone of what sleeps inside her belly. This is a story about physics, yes. It is a story about chemistry. But before the fire and the shockwave, it is a story about secrecy. It is a story about a system, a vast bureaucratic machine of war that decided that the risk of death was acceptable, provided it remained invisible. The captain of the Mont-Blanc, Aimé Le Medec, stands on the bridge. He is a seasoned mariner, a man of the sea, which means he is a man of caution. He knows the rules. He respects the ocean because he knows the ocean does not care about him. But today, he is not just fighting the tides or the wind. He is navigating a paradox. The British Admiralty, the supreme authority of the naval war, has issued a strict directive. If a ship carries munitions, it must fly a red flag, the international signal for danger. Keep away. Explosives on board. That is the rule of the sea. However, there is another rule, a newer rule born of the paranoia of the U-boat war. If you fly a red flag in open waters, or even near the coast, you are painting a target on your back. You are telling every German submarine commander exactly which ship to torpedo first. You are advertising your value, and so the orders contradict themselves. Be safe, but be secret. Warn the other ships, but do not warn the enemy. Captain Le Medec has made his choice. The red flag remains folded away in a locker. The Mont-Blanc glides toward the Narrows, the slender channel that connects the outer ocean to the inner Bedford Basin, completely anonymous. She is a wolf in sheep's clothing, but the wolf is asleep, and the sheep is made of iron. The pilot comes aboard. Francis Mackey. He is a local man, experienced, confident. He knows the currents of Halifax better than he knows the lines on his own palm. He climbs the rope ladder, greets the captain, and takes the command of the movement. He does not know the specific chemistry of every crate in the hold, but he knows this ship is heavy. He can feel it in the way she sluggishly responds to the rudder. She is dragging. She is bloated with her cargo. Mackie is frustrated, not with the ship, but with the traffic. The war has turned his home, a quiet maritime city, into a chaotic parking lot. Ships are everywhere. Convoys forming, destroyers darting like sharks, neutral vessels waiting for inspection. The Narrows. The throat of the harbour is tight. It is hard enough to navigate on a clear summer day. On a hazy winter morning, with the traffic of a global war funneling through, it is a gauntlet. He gives the order to move. The engine thrums, a low, rhythmic heartbeat that vibrates through the deck plates. The screw turns. The Mont-Blanc begins her slow, fatal crawl toward the city. Down below, beneath the boots of the sailors, beneath the steel plating of the deck, lies the reason for the secrecy. If we could peel back the skin of the ship, if we could look through the iron ribs and into the dark, cavernous holds, we would see a nightmare of industrial chemistry. The manifest is a document of madness. It lists materials that were never meant to be packed so tightly together, certainly not on a ship that is prone to sparks, certainly not in waters crowded with other vessels. First, there is the TNT, trinitrotoluene, 200 tons of it. That alone would be enough to shatter the hull and kill everyone on board. But the TNT is the stable part of the cargo. It is the sleeping giant. It requires a significant shock to wake it up. Next to the TNT, there is the picric acid, 2,300 tons. Picric acid is a nasty, temperamental substance. Used in artillery shells, it is more powerful than TNT, but far more sensitive. It is a dry yellow crystal. It hates metal. If picric acid touches iron, it forms picrates, salts that are so unstable they can explode if you simply drop them. The crew has lined the holds with wood, desperately trying to keep the crystals away from the ship's own skeleton. But the crystals are there, thousands of crates of them, shifting slightly with the roll of the sea. And then there is the benzol. This is the fuse. Benzol is a high-octane fuel, a liquid vapor that is lighter than air but heavier than hope. It is carried in barrels, hundreds of them, stacked on the deck because there was no room left below. The barrels are not sealed with the precision of modern science. They are standard oil drums. They leak. As the ship moves, the benzol sloshes. Fumes escape. They drift along the deck, invisible, sweet-smelling, and deadly. A single match, a single spark from a boot nail striking a metal plate could ignite the benzol. The sailors know this. They can smell it. Let us pause to look at these men, the crew of the Mont-Blanc. History often treats them as statistics, numbers to be tallied after the disaster. But they are men. They have names. They have faces. They have letters tucked into their pockets, written to mothers in Brittany or wives in Marseille. They are not volunteers for a suicide mission. They are merchant sailors, conscripted by the necessity of the time. They are tired. The Atlantic crossing is grueling. The fear of submarines is constant. They sleep in shifts, in hammocks that sway with the ship, dreaming of solid ground, of warm bread, of wine that doesn't taste like tin. They do not think of themselves as heroes. They think of themselves as workers. Their job is to move cargo from point A to point B. The nature of the cargo is a concern, yes, but it is a concern they have learned to live with. It is a dull, background anxiety, like a toothache that never quite goes away. A young deckhand leans against the railing, watching the coastline of Halifax drift by. He sees the wooden houses climbing the hills. He sees the smoke rising from chimneys. He imagines the families inside having breakfast. Porridge, coffee, normalcy. He feels a profound separation from them. He is floating on a barrel of gunpowder, separated from their domestic peace by a few hundred yards of cold water. He is invisible to them. They look out their windows and see a ship. They do not see the danger. They do not know that their lives are currently hanging by a thread. And that thread is being held by the steady hands of Francis Mackie, the pilot. The ship moves past the anti-submarine nets. The gates of the harbour are open. The Mont-Blanc is inside. But she is not alone. The harbour is a chessboard, and the pieces are moving. While the Mont-Blanc heads north toward the Bedford Basin to join her convoy, another ship is preparing to head south, out to sea. This is the Imo. If the Mont-Blanc is a heavy, sluggish beast of burden, the Imo is a lean, anxious greyhound. She is a relief ship, chartered by the Belgian Relief Commission. Her hull is painted with giant letters, Belgian Relief. She carries grain to the starving victims of the war. Because of her humanitarian mission, she has a certain status. She is neutral. She is untouchable. And her captain and crew carry that sense of righteousness with them. The Imo is in a hurry. She was supposed to leave the day before, but her coal arrived late. She has been stuck in the harbor overnight, burning time, burning money. Her captain, Håkon From, is impatient. He wants to get out. He wants to clear the narrows, clear the nets, and get into the open ocean before the day is wasted. The pilot on the Imo is William Hayes. Like Mackie on the Mont-Blanc, Hayes is a veteran. He knows the rules, but he also knows the pressure of the schedule. The war waits for no one. The starving Belgians wait for no one. There is a sense of urgency on the bridge of the Imo that is palpable. The engines are engaged. The ship pulls away from her anchorage. She is moving fast, faster than she should in the harbor. She enters the Narrows from the north, heading south. The Mont-Blanc enters the Narrows from the south, heading north. 2 ships, 1 channel. The Narrows is not a wide body of water. It is a straight, tight passage, barely a kilometer wide at its pinch point. On a normal day, 2 ships can pass each other with room to spare, provided they stick to their lanes. The rules of the road at sea are simple, much like the rules on land. You keep to the right. You pass port to port, red light to red light. It is a dance that sailors have performed for centuries, but today is not a normal day. The harbor is crowded. There is a tugboat towing a string of barges near the Halifax side of the channel. The Imo, eager to pass, swings out around them. She moves into the center of the channel. Then, seeing another vessel, she swings even further. She is now positioned on the wrong side of the road. She is in the lane, meant for incoming traffic. This is the first domino. It falls silently. On the bridge of the Mont-Blanc, pilot Mackie squints through the morning mist. He sees the Imo approaching. He sees her white hull, her neutral markings, and he sees her position. She is dead ahead. She is in his water. "She's on the wrong side," he mutters. It is not a scream. It is an observation of a professional. He expects the Imo to correct herself. He expects her to turn to her right, to swing back into her own lane. He waits. The distance closes. A mile, half a mile. The Imo does not turn. Mackie reaches for the whistle cord. He pulls it. 1 short blast, he tongs si whoop. In the language of the sea, this signal is precise. It translates to, "I am altering my course to starboard." It also implies, "I am following the rules. I am keeping to the right. You should do the same." The sound echoes off the hills of Halifax and Dartmouth. It rolls over the water, a lonely mechanical cry. On the Imo, pilot Hayes hears the whistle. He sees the grey shape of the Mont-Blanc. He knows he is in the wrong lane, but he has momentum. He has the swing of the ship. He assumes the other vessel, this smaller, rusty French steamer, will get out of his way. After all, he is the Imo. He is the Belgian relief. He has the right of way by virtue of his mission, or perhaps by virtue of his size, or perhaps simply because he has nowhere else to go. Hayes pulls his whistle cord. 2 short blasts. Whoop, whoop. This signal is the reply. It translates to, "I am altering my course to port." It means, "I am staying where I am. I am staying on your side. You move." On the Mont-Blanc, the blood drains from Mackie's face. The arrogance of the signal is stunning. The Imo is refusing to yield. She is forcing a game of chicken in the tightest part of the harbor. Captain Lemedic stares at the approaching ship. He looks at his pilot. "Why is he doing that?" he asks in French. "Does he not see us?" They have a choice now. The Mont-Blanc can stop, she can reverse, but she is heavy. She is laden with 3,000 tons of explosives. Momentum is a cruel mistress. You cannot stop a ship like you stop a car. You have to fight the water, you have to fight the weight. And there is the fear of the cargo. If they run aground to avoid the collision, the shock could detonate the picric acid. If they turn too sharply, the barrels of benzol could tip and spill. Every option is dangerous. Mackie blows his whistle again. 1 blast. Whoop. "I'm keeping to the right. Move over." The Imo replies again. 2 blasts. Whoop, whoop. "I am staying left." It is a conversation of steam and sound, a fatal argument conducted at closing speed. The ships are drawn together, as if by a magnetic force. The people on the shore stop to watch. It is an odd sight. Two massive steel beasts converging in slow motion. The workers on the docks pause their lifting. The women hanging laundry on the back porches of the hillside houses shield their eyes against the glare. They do not know what is in the grey ship, but they know that ships shouldn't be this close. The distance is now measured in lengths, 3 ship lengths, 2. Mackie makes a desperate decision. He cannot go right. The shore is there. He cannot go straight. The Imo is there. He orders the helm hard to port. He tries to swing the Mont-Blanc across the path of the Imo, hoping to let the other ship slip by his stern. It is a last-ditch maneuver, a violation of the rules to save the ship from the consequences of the rules. At the same moment on the Imo, Hayes orders his engines to reverse. Full astern. The propeller of the Imo bites into the water, churning it into white foam. The ship shudders. The reversal of the screw has a side effect. It causes the bow of the ship to swing. The Imo's nose turns, not away from the Mont-Blanc, but toward her. Physics takes over. The grand ambition of the war, the schedules, the egos of the pilots, the letters in the sailors' pockets, none of it matters now. All that matters is mass and velocity. The bow of the Imo is like a chisel. The hull of the Mont-Blanc is the stone. It is 8:45 in the morning. The collision, when it comes, is not a thunderclap. It is not the end of the world. Not yet. It is a grinding, screeching tear, the sound of metal being tortured. The Imo's prow slices into the starboard side of the Mont-Blanc. It cuts through the steel plating. It pushes into the number 1 hold. It does not hit the TNT. It misses the main stores of picric acid. But it hits the deck. It hits the barrels. The force of the impact shatters the oil drums. Benzol gushes out like blood from a wound. It pours over the deck. It pours down into the hold. It soaks the crates of acid. It creates a vapor cloud that instantly mixes with the cold morning air. The ships are locked together for a moment, an intimate, destructive embrace. Then the Imo, her engines still reversing, pulls back. She withdraws her bow from the wound she has inflicted. As steel scrapes against steel, friction occurs, sparks fly. Tiny, bright, insignificant sparks. In a factory, they would be nothing. In a blacksmith shop, they would be routine. But here, in this cloud of benzol vapor, a single spark is a sentence of death. The vapor catches. A flame, pale and almost invisible in the daylight, dances across the spilled liquid. It is small at first. A flicker. A curiosity. It looks like a spirit running along the deck. The crew of the Mont-Blanc freezes. They are the only people in the world who understand what has just happened. The people on the shore see a fender bender. They see a minor maritime accident. They see something to talk about over dinner. The sailors see the end of time. They know the chemistry. They know that the fire will heat the picric acid. They know the benzol will act as the accelerant. They know that beneath their feet, the mechanism of a catastrophe has been engaged, and the timer is ticking down. There is a moment of silence on the deck. The kind of silence that exists in the eye of a hurricane. The fire crackles softly. The water laps against the hull. The whistle of the Imo fades into an echo. Then the shouting begins, but it is already too late. The system, the invisible machine of orders, secrecy, and war, has done its work. It has brought these two ships to this exact point at this exact second, and it has stepped back to watch the result. The grand ambition of the war has created a monster in the harbor. And now, the monster is awake. The fire begins to climb the rigging. Black smoke, thick and oily, starts to twist toward the sky. They signal flag far darker and more terrifying than the red one they refuse to fly. The city of Halifax watches the smoke rise, curious, unaware that the clock has started. Tick, tick, tick. The sailors scramble for the hoses, but their hands are shaking. They are not fighting a fire, they are fighting the inevitable. The water pressure is low. The hoses are stiff with cold. And the fire. The fire is hungry. It feeds on the benzol with a roaring appetite. It is not behaving like a normal fire. It is aggressive. It leaps. It hunts. Captain Le Medec looks at the Inferno spreading across his foredeck. He looks at the city of Halifax, resting peacefully on the port side. He looks at the town of Dartmouth on the starboard. He calculates the distance. He calculates the time. He realizes, with a cold sinking dread, that he cannot save the ship. He cannot save the cargo. The only question that remains is whether he can save his men. But even that is a gamble, because the ship is no longer under his command. The ship now belongs to the fire, and the fire is moving toward the hold where the picric acid waits, sensitive, unstable, and vast. The Mont-Blanc drifts. The engine is dead. The steering is gone. She is a burning torch floating on the tide, moving slowly, inexorably toward the piers of Halifax, toward the crowds that are beginning to gather to watch the spectacle. The pilot, Mackie, looks at the captain. There are no words left to be spoken. The protocols of the Admiralty, the secrecy of the mission, the pride of the service, it all dissolves in the face of the encroaching heat. Abandon ship, as the order comes. Not a shout of defiance, but a whisper of defeat. They lower the lifeboats. They do not look back at the city. They row as if the devil himself is snapping at their heels, because they know something the city does not. They know that the smoke rising into the air is not just smoke. It is the fuse of a bomb that is powerful enough to erase a civilization. And the fuse is burning short. The harbor is wide, but it is not wide enough. The sky is open, but it offers no escape. The stage is set. The actors have played their parts. Now the machine takes over, and the city continues to watch, mesmerized by the flames, unaware that they are witnessing the final seconds of their own world. The collision is over, but the catastrophe is just beginning. To the casual observer on the Halifax waterfront, the incident appears almost trivial. A scrape, a bit of bad driving, the sort of thing that results in insurance claims and angry letters between shipping companies, not the end of a city. The damage to the hull of the Mont-Blanc is not catastrophic in a structural sense. She is not sinking. If she were carrying grain, the crew would simply patch the hole and limp into the dock. But the fire is different. It is not a natural fire. It does not behave like wood burning in a hearth. It is a chemical beast fed by the spilled blood of the benzol barrels. The flames are aggressive, violent and strangely colored, heavy with soot, streaked with greasy reds and violets. They do not flicker. They surge. They roar. The heat on the deck becomes unbearable within seconds. It is a heat that blisters paint and melts rubber. The crew of the Mont-Blanc, now in their lifeboats, are rowing. They are rowing with a frantic, animalistic energy. They are not rowing toward the nearest dock to help put out the fire. They are rowing for the open shore across the harbor, toward the woods of Dartmouth, as far away from the ship as they can get. As they pull their oars through the freezing water, they are screaming. They are standing up in the boats, waving their arms, shouting at the other vessels, shouting at the people on the piers. Powder. Munitions explode. But their words are lost. They are shouting into the wind. More importantly, they are shouting in French. To the ears of the Halifax dock workers and the sailors on the British naval ships nearby, these men look like cowards. They look like a panicked foreign crew abandoning a manageable fire. They look hysterical. The language barrier becomes a wall of silence. The warning is delivered, but it is not received. The Mont-Blanc, abandoned and burning, is now a ghost ship. She is no longer steered by a pilot. She is steered by the physics of the harbor. The tide is coming in. The current catches her heavy, sluggish hull and begins to guide her. She drifts, slowly, deliberately. She moves toward the Richmond district, toward Pier 6. This is the cruelest twist of the geography. Pier 6 is not a desolate stretch of coastline. It is the industrial heart of the waterfront. It is surrounded by rail yards, factories, and working-class homes. It is a place of density. Wooden houses are stacked up the hillside overlooking the water, their windows facing the stage where the tragedy is unfolding. As the ship drifts, the smoke column grows. It is a thick black pillar, rising thousands of feet into the clear winter air. It is a spectacle, and human beings are drawn to spectacles. In the schools on the hill, children rush to the windows. The teachers, curious themselves, let the lessons pause. They watch the burning ship drift. It is exciting. It is a break in the monotony of war. In the factories, men put down their tools. They gather on the loading docks. They smoke cigarettes and point. They speculate about the cargo. Oil, one says. Rags, says another. Maybe it's just trash. The fire department is alerted. The horse-drawn engine, the Patricia, clatters down the cobblestone streets, its bell ringing. The firefighters are brave men. They are rushing toward the pier, expecting to fight a standard blaze. They have no idea that they are racing toward a supernova. The Mont-Blanc finally comes to rest. She brushes against the wooden pilings of Pier 6. The wood of the pier, dried by the winter wind, catches fire almost immediately. The ship and the shore are now connected by a bridge of flame. It is 8:55 a.m. We are now in the waiting room of the apocalypse. For nearly 20 minutes the ship burns. This is the period of time where history holds its breath. It is a time of terrible, agonizing normalcy. A telegraph operator named Vincent Coleman sits in his office at the rail yard, just a few hundred yards from the burning ship. He controls the movement of the trains. He sees the smoke. He sees the sailors rowing away. And then, a sailor, perhaps one of the few who speaks English or perhaps a naval officer who has realized the truth, runs past the office. "Get out! The ship is full of explosives." Coleman grabs his coat. He starts to run. He makes it to the door. But then the machine of the system calls him back. The logic of his duty overrides the instinct for survival. He knows the schedule. He knows that the number 10 express train from St. John is due to arrive any minute. It carries hundreds of passengers. It is hurtling down the tracks, directly toward the blast zone. If he runs, they die. Coleman turns back. He sits down at his desk. The window in front of him is filled with the black smoke of the Mont-Blanc. He taps out a message on his key. It is a message that will travel down the wires, out of the city, and into history. "Hold up the train. Ammunition ship afire in harbor, making for Pier 6 and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys." He stops the train. He saves 300 lives. He effectively signs his own death warrant with a series of electrical pulses. He stays at his post, a single cog in the machine refusing to break, even as the world ends. Down in the hold of the Mont-Blanc, the chemistry has reached the point of no return. The heat has penetrated the steel deck. The picric acid crystals are vibrating. The molecules are breaking down, shedding their stability. The water in the harbor around the hull is beginning to boil. The paint on the ship's sides is peeling away in great curling sheets. The barrels of benzol are exploding one by one, sending plumes of fire shooting into the sky like fireworks. This only draws more people to the windows. "Look," they say. "Look at the colors." Families stand on their porches. Fathers lift their toddlers up to see the burning boat. It is a beautiful, terrible morning. The sailors in the rowboats reach the Dartmouth shore. They scramble into the woods. They throw themselves flat on the frozen earth, covering their heads with their arms. They are weeping. They are praying. They are waiting for the sound they know is coming. At 9:04 a.m. and 35 seconds, the waiting ends. It does not begin with a noise, it begins with a flash. The reaction inside the Mont-Blanc happens faster than the human eye can process. The 300 tons of picric acid and the 200 tons of TNT detonate simultaneously. This is not an explosion in the conventional sense. It is a transmutation of matter. The ship does not just break apart, it vaporizes. In 1/5000th of a second, the steel hull, the cargo, the water surrounding it, and the air itself are converted into a superheated gas. The temperature at the center of the blast reaches 5,000 degrees Celsius. It is hotter than the surface of the sun. A white sphere of energy expands outward. It moves at 23 times the speed of sound. The first thing to die is the light. The flash is so intense that it blinds anyone looking directly at it. Retinas are scorched instantly. The shadows of people standing at their windows are burned onto the wallpaper behind them, photographic negatives of the final moment of their lives. Then comes the pressure. The shockwave is a physical wall of air, compressed until it is hard as iron. It slams into the city of Halifax. Pier 6 is gone, not destroyed, erased. The ground is scooped out, leaving a crater in the harbor floor so deep that the bedrock is exposed to the sky for a fraction of a second before the water rushes back in. The Emo, the ship that started it all, is lifted out of the water. This massive steel vessel, weighing thousands of tons, is thrown like a child's toy. It flies through the air and lands on the Dartmouth shore, twisted and broken. The gun of the Mont-Blanc, a piece of artillery weighing half a ton, is launched into the sky. It arcs over the city, flying 2 miles inland before crashing down near a lake. The anchor, weighing 100 pounds, is thrown 3 miles in the opposite direction. But it is the city that bears the brunt of the anger. The shockwave hits the hillside of Richmond. It does not knock houses down. It splinters them. It turns wood, glass and brick into shrapnel. A square mile of the city is flattened instantly. Churches, schools, factories, homes, they simply cease to exist in their vertical form. They become a tangled mat of debris, leveled to the ground. 600 people die in an instant. They die at their windows, they die in their beds, they die at their desks. Vincent Coleman dies with his hand on the telegraph key. The firefighters on the pier are vaporized. The only trace of them is the steering wheel of their fire engine found miles away. The sound arrives last. It is a roar so loud it can be heard in Truro, 60 miles away. It is felt as a tremor in Cape Breton, 200 miles away. The acoustic energy is so vast it shatters windows 50 miles from the harbour. But in the centre, in the blast zone, there is no sound. The eardrums of the survivors are ruptured instantly. For them, the end of the world is silent. Following the blast comes the vacuum. The explosion has pushed all the air away, creating a void. Now the air rushes back in. A hurricane-force wind screams in reverse, sucking debris, people and fire back toward the centre of the harbour. And then the water returns. The blast displaced the ocean, creating a tsunami. A massive wave, foaming and dirty, rises up and surges over the shattered waterfront. It drowns those who survived the fire. It washes over the ruins of the pier, extinguishing the flames only to replace them with a freezing, chaotic flood. The air is filled with a strange, glittering mist. It is oil. It is unburnt carbon. It is pulverized glass. Millions of tiny shards of glass fill the sky, raining down on the survivors, blinding those who looked up at the wrong moment. Then slowly the noise returns, not the roar of the blast, but the small, human sounds of the aftermath. The moans, the screams, the crackle of thousands of small fires starting in the wreckage, fueled by overturned wood stoves and broken gas lines. The grand ambition is over. The secret cargo has been delivered. The system that valued secrecy over safety has achieved its final result. The Mont-Blanc is gone. The sailors are hiding in the woods, alive but forever marked. The city of Halifax has been broken, and over the narrows where the smoke begins to clear, a new silence settles. It is the heavy, suffocating silence of a battlefield where the fighting has ended, and only the counting of the dead remains. The machine has stopped, the cost has been paid. The sound that erased a city is followed by a silence that defines it. It is not a peaceful silence. It is the stunned, ringing void of a world that has been struck deaf. In the minutes following the blast, the surviving population of Halifax does not speak. They do not scream, not yet. They simply exist in a state of suspended animation, trying to comprehend a landscape that violates every rule of their reality. The air is thick with a strange, oily darkness. The sun has been blotted out by the mushroom cloud, and a black rain begins to fall. It is a toxic slurry of unburnt carbon, pulverized debris, and vaporized water. It coats the ruins in a greasy film. It coats the faces of the living and the dead alike, turning them into uniform, ghostly statues. Those who crawl out of the wreckage are changed. They are covered in a grey dust. Their clothes have been torn away by the pressure wave. Many are bleeding from hundreds of tiny cuts, the result of the window glass that shattered inward at the moment of detonation. They wander the streets like sleepwalkers. They call out names, but their voices are thin, swallowed by the magnitude of the destruction. Down at the waterfront, the horror is elemental. The harbour water, having rushed back into the void, is churning with debris, timbers, crates, furniture, and bodies. The water is choked with the lost. The sailors of the Mont-Blanc, watching from the woods on the Dartmouth side, see the wave recede. They see the smoke clearing. They see that the city they looked at just an hour ago, the houses, the steeples, the docks, is simply gone. It has been planned flat, as if a giant hand had swept across a table. They do not feel relief at their survival. They feel a crushing weight. They know with absolute certainty that they will be blamed for this. They are the outsiders. They are the ones who brought the fire. As the day wears on, the shock begins to wear off, replaced by agony. The hospitals that are still standing are overwhelmed. Doctors operate on kitchen tables. There is no anesthetic. There are no bandages. They use shirts, curtains, anything to stop the bleeding. The eye injuries are the worst. Thousands of people, drawn to their windows to watch the burning ship, have been blinded by the glass. Halifax becomes a city of the blind, a city of people groping in the dark, led by those few who happen to be looking away. But nature is not done with them yet. The final insult comes the next morning. As the fires still smolder in the ruins, the sky turns a heavy, leaden grey. The wind picks up, the temperature plummets. A blizzard strikes. It is one of the worst storms in years. 16 inches of snow fall on the shattered city. The wind howls through the skeleton of the north end, burying the wreckage in white. It covers the bodies that have not yet been recovered. It freezes the survivors who are trapped in the basements of their collapsed homes. The rescuers, digging frantically with shovels and bare hands, are forced to stop. The cold kills those the fire missed. It is a scene of biblical cruelty. The black scar of the explosion is covered by a pristine white shroud. The city is silent again, muffled by the snow. Then the machinery of the state wakes up. When a disaster of this magnitude occurs, the human mind demands a villain. Physics is not a satisfying answer. Chemical reaction is not something you can put in a jail cell. Bureaucratic incompetence is too abstract to hang. The people want a name, they want a face. They want someone to stand in the dock and answer for the dead children found in the snow. The investigations begin immediately, even as the bodies are still being counted. The Canadian government, the British Admiralty, and the local authorities all scramble to control the narrative. They need to ensure that the blame falls on individuals, not on the system that created the danger. The Mont-Blanc's captain, Aimée Le Medic, and her pilot, Francis Mackey, are arrested. They are charged with manslaughter and criminal negligence. They are paraded before the press. The narrative is simple. The French ship was a floating bomb, recklessly navigated by incompetent men who abandoned their post to save their own skins. The xenophobia is palpable. Rumors swirl that the Mont-Blanc was actually a German raider in disguise. People whisper that the captain did it on purpose, that he is a spy. The fact that the crew survived is seen as evidence of their guilt. Why didn't they go down with the ship? The editorials ask. Why didn't they die like men? The trial is a theater of the absurd. It takes place in a courtroom packed with angry survivors. The walls are lined with men in suits, lawyers representing the shipping lines, the insurance companies, the navies. They are not there to find the truth. They are there to protect assets. Pilot Mackey takes the stand. He is a proud man, a skilled mariner, but he is broken. He tries to explain the rules of the road. He explains the whistle signals. He explains that the Emo was on the wrong side of the channel. He explains that he had the right of way. I did everything I could, he says. I pulled the whistle. I held my course until I couldn't. But the prosecution is relentless. They pick apart his decisions. Why didn't he drop anchor? Why didn't he beach the ship earlier? Why didn't he fly the red flag? The red flag, the symbol of the paradox. Mackey explains that the Admiralty forbade the flag to prevent submarine attacks. The Admiralty lawyer, sitting in the back, says nothing. The system remains silent while its servants are crucified. Captain Le Medic speaks through a translator. He is bewildered. He is a man who followed orders. He carried the cargo he was told to carry. He entered the port when he was told to enter. He explains the chemistry of benzyl and picric acid. He explains that once the fire started, the ship was already dead. Staying aboard would not have saved Halifax. It would only have added 40 more names to the death toll. We rode, he says quietly. We rode to warn you. But the court does not want to hear about warning. The court wants to hear about liability. The inquiry, led by Justice Arthur Drysdale, is not an impartial search for facts. Drysdale is a man of the establishment. He is swayed by the status of the Emo, the Belgian relief ship, the noble mission. He is swayed by the British naval presence. It is far easier to blame a scruffy French tramp steamer than to implicate the intricate web of wartime shipping protocols. The verdict, when it comes, is a foregone conclusion. The Mont-Blanc is found solely at fault. Mackey and Le Medec are vilified. The license of the pilot is stripped. The captain is disgraced. But the legal battles do not end there. They drag on for years, climbing up to the Supreme Court of Canada and eventually to the Privy Council in London. As time passes and the emotion fades, the cool logic of the law begins to see what the angry mob could not. The higher courts realize that the Emo was indeed on the wrong side of the road. They realize that both ships made errors. The final ruling splits the blame, 50-50. 2 ships, 2 captains, 2 pilots, equally responsible. But this mathematical division of guilt satisfies no one. It feels hollow. If everyone is to blame, then no one is to blame. And if no one is to blame, then the death of 2,000 people is just an accident, a clerical error written in blood. While the lawyers argue in warm courtrooms, Halifax is living in the cold reality of reconstruction. The city must keep living. This is the brutal imperative of survival. The dead are buried in mass graves. The unidentifiable remains, limbs, torsos, fragments of bone, are placed in caskets marked with numbers. Mothers look for children they will never find. Husbands look for wives who have vanished into ash. But the harbor is still open. The war is still on. The convoys must sail. The grain must move. The machine cannot stop for grief. Work crews descend on the Richmond district. They do not just repair, they erase. The rubble is cleared. The splintered foundations are dug up. The twisted iron is hauled away for scrap. A new neighborhood rises from the dust. It is built of stone this time, hydrostone, a concrete block material designed to be fireproof. It is ordered, neat and modern. It is designed to look nothing like the wooden slum that burned. The streets are paved. The scars are covered over. The physical evidence of the disaster is systematically removed. The shattered windows are replaced. The gouged earth is filled in. Within a few years, a stranger walking through the north end of Halifax might not know that the apocalypse happened here, save for the fact that all the trees are young. There are no statues for the sailors of the Mont-Blanc. There are no plaques for the deckhands who smelled the benzol. The heroes of the official narrative are the politicians who organized the relief funds, the doctors who worked without sleep, the distant admirals who sent telegrams of condolence. The crew of the Mont-Blanc vanishes from the story. They are repatriated to France. They return to the sea because that is the only life they know. They carry the sound of the explosion in their ears for the rest of their lives, a secret burden. They are the men who knew the end of the world, and they are the men the world chose to forget. Even the memory of the explosion itself begins to drift. It becomes a set of statistics in a history book, the largest man-made explosion prior to the atomic age. It becomes a trivia question. The horror of the event, the sensation of the skin burning, the sound of the vacuum sucking the air from the lungs, the smell of the picric acid, is smoothed over by the passage of time. We prefer our tragedies to have clear morals. We like stories where the good guys make a mistake, or the bad guys do something evil, and we learn a lesson. But Halifax offers no such comfort. There is a trial without the dead. The 2,000 victims do not testify. The telegraph operator, Vincent Coleman, does not testify. The children who watched from the school windows do not testify. Instead, the record is filled with talk of rudder angles, knot speeds, and harbor regulations. The legal system takes the chaos of the Inferno and tries to force it into a box of rationality. It tries to measure the immeasurable. And in doing so, it commits a second erasure. The first explosion destroyed the bodies. The investigation destroys the context. It turns a systemic failure of the entire war machine into a traffic accident. It protects the Admiralty. It protects the shipping companies. It protects the logic of the war itself. By the time the final verdicts are read, the grass is already growing over the mass graves. The city has moved on. The hydrostone district is bustling with new families. The port is busy with new ships. The Mont-Blanc is a memory, a ghost story told to frighten children. The Emo is repaired, renamed, and sent back to sea, as if nothing happened. The silence that follows the explosion eventually gives way to the noise of the 20th century. The roar of the blast is replaced by the roar of industry, of cars, of sirens. But for those who were there, for the blinded and the bereaved, the silence never really lifts. They live in the shadow of the mushroom cloud long after the sky has cleared. They know that the city is built on a lie, the lie that we are in control. The lie that the systems we build to protect us will not one day turn around and devour us. The chapter of the fall ends not with a bang but with a gavel. The case is closed, the files are archived. The dead are left to their rest. But the echo remains. It vibrates in the bedrock of the harbor. It waits in the chemistry of the next cargo, in the hold of the next ship, in the hubris of the next command. The crisis has passed. The legacy begins. Science, they say, is often written in ink, but safety is written in blood. A century later, we can look at the Mont-Blanc not as a ship, but as a chemistry experiment gone wrong. We can place the disaster under the microscope of modern understanding. In 1917, the behavior of high explosives was known, but it was often treated with a cavalier attitude born of the Industrial Revolution. Men handled TNT like they handled coal. They treated picric acid like fertilizer. Today, we know exactly what happened in the molecular darkness of that hold. We know that picric acid, trinitrophenol, is a substance that occupies a terrifying middle ground between solid and energy. It is a molecule that is desperate to let go. When the bow of the IMO sliced into the Mont Blanc, it didn't just break wood and steel. It crushed the picric acid crystals. It created friction. And then the benzol arrived. Benzol is a solvent. When it poured over the crushed picric acid, it began a reaction that no sailor could have stopped. It didn't just burn, it solvated the explosive, creating a hypersensitive mixture that was essentially a liquid bomb. The heat from the fire on the deck wasn't just melting the ship, it was cooking the cargo, priming it, vibrating the molecules until they reached a state of critical instability. The explosion wasn't magic, it was physics demanding its due. The calculations done by modern forensic engineers show that the blast force was inevitable given the mixture. The containment of the ship's hull, the tamping effect of the water and the steel, allowed the pressure to build to unimaginable levels before the casing finally failed. Because of what happened in the Narrows, the books were rewritten. The Orange Book, the United Nations recommendations on the transport of dangerous goods, exists largely because of lessons learned in harbors like Halifax. Every time you see a placard on a truck on the highway, a diamond-shaped sign with a flame or a skull, you are looking at a legacy of the Mont Blanc. The segregation of cargo, the rule that says you cannot put a volatile fuel next to a high explosive, is a rule etched into the law by the vaporized steel of 1917. We learned, but we learned too late for the people of Richmond. We learned too late for the firefighters who raced toward the pier. Knowledge is a heavy burden when it is purchased at such a price. If you stand on the Halifax waterfront today, the silence of the past is buried beneath the noise of the present. The harbor is a busy, thriving place. It is no longer the grey, grim staging ground of the Great War. It is a port of commerce, of tourism, of life. Massive container ships, far larger than the Mont Blanc ever was, glide silently through the Narrows. They are steered by GPS, monitored by radar, tracked by satellites. The pilots who guide them carry tablets, not just intuition. The water is clean. The oil slick is gone. The debris was dredged up decades ago. You can walk along the boardwalk and see children eating ice cream. You can see joggers with headphones, running past the spot where the pier used to be. The geography of the disaster has been overwritten by the geography of leisure and efficiency. But if you know where to look, the scars are still there. Up on the hill, in the Hydrostone district, the houses stand in neat, orderly rows. They are beautiful, sturdy homes built from compressed concrete blocks. They look charming, but they are tombstones. Every single one of them sits on the footprint of a wooden house that was swept away. The entire neighborhood is a monument to the fact that wood was not strong enough to survive the mistake. And then there are the fragments. In the woods near the water, hidden by brush, You can still find twisted pieces of metal, rusted iron that looks like driftwood, but is too heavy to lift. These are the pieces of the Mont Blanc. The most haunting monument is the anchor shank. It sits in a park, miles from the water. It is a massive shaft of steel weighing over 1,000 pounds. It was thrown there by the blast. It fell out of the sky like a meteor. It rests there now, painted black, surrounded by grass. People walk their dogs past it. They glance at it, perhaps reading the plaque, perhaps not. It is a surreal object, a piece of a ship sitting in a suburb. It is a physical testament to the violence that ripped the world apart. It anchors the memory to the ground, preventing it from drifting away entirely. But the deepest scar is not in the iron or the stone, it is in the water itself. The pilots who navigate the harbour today still feel it. When they pass the Narrows, there is a shift in the conversation, a nod of respect. They know they are sailing over a graveyard. They know that beneath the keel of their modern leviathans, the bottom of the harbour is still shaped by the crater. The mud has filled it in, the currents have smoothed it over, but the depression remains. Faux shadow on the sonar. And what of the men, the sailors, the ghosts of the Mont Blanc? For decades, they were the villains of the story, the Frenchmen who ran away, the cowards who didn't fly the flag. History is often unkind to those who survive when they are expected to die. But let us look at them now through the lens of a century. Let us strip away the wartime propaganda and the anger of the grief-stricken and see them as they were. Aimé le Medic was not a monster. He was a merchant captain trying to navigate a bureaucratic nightmare. He was a man who had spent his life at sea, who respected the ocean, and who was placed in an impossible situation by his superiors. He was told to be invisible. He was told to carry a cargo that should never have been loaded. When the fire started, he didn't run out of cowardice. He ran out of calculation. He was a mathematician of survival. He knew the variable of time, and he knew the variable of the cargo. He solved the equation instantly. The ship is lost, the city is in danger. The only variable left to change was the location of his crew. And the deckhands, the men whose names we barely know. Yves, Jean, Pierre. They were boys mostly, conscripts. They wrote letters home complaining about the cold, about the food, about the lack of cigarettes. They didn't want to be in Halifax. They wanted to be in Brittany. They wanted to be in the vineyards of the south. They are the tragic figures of this story, because they tried. In those final frantic minutes as they rowed toward the Dartmouth shore, they were the only people in the entire harbour who were telling the truth. They stood up in their lifeboats. They waved their arms. They screamed. Powder! Fire! Get back! They screamed until their throats were raw. They tried to save the people on the piers. They tried to save the crew of the Imo. They tried to save the children watching from the windows. But they were cursed by the Tower of Babel. Their warnings were in French. To the ears of the English-speaking Haligonians, they sounded like gibberish. They sounded like panic. Imagine the horror of that moment. To know the end of the world is coming, to shout it to the heavens and to be met with blank stares. To see the people you are trying to save simply stand there, watching the pretty fire, unaware that they are seconds away from atomization. That is the true tragedy of the crew. Not that they caused the blast, but that they were forced to watch it happen, helpless to stop it, their warnings dissolving in the wind. They lived the rest of their lives with that silence. They went back to France. They grew old. They died. But one has to wonder, did they ever sleep soundly again? Or did they close their eyes and see the white flash? Did they hear the silence of the vacuum? They were the first witnesses to the era of industrial mega-disasters. They were the first to see what happens when the machines we build become more powerful than our ability to control them. And this is where the story of the Mont Blanc stops being a history lesson and starts being a mirror. Because the Mont Blanc was not an anomaly, it was a prototype. Look at the history of the 20th and 21st centuries. The names change, the coordinates change, but the story remains the same. Texas City, 1947. A ship carrying ammonium nitrate catches fire in the harbor. The crew tries to fight it. The spectators gather. The ship explodes. Hundreds die. It is a carbon copy of Halifax, played out 30 years later in the heat of the Gulf of Mexico. Bhopal, 1984. A chemical plant leaks gas into a sleeping city. The safety systems are turned off to save money. The warnings are ignored. Thousands die in agony. Chernobyl, 1986. A test goes wrong. The operators fight the reactor. The government tries to hide the scale of the disaster. The cloud spreads. Beirut, 2020. A warehouse in the port filled with ammonium nitrate, the same chemical family as the cargo of the Mont-Blanc. It sits there for years, ignored by corrupt officials, decaying, unstable. A fire starts. A massive explosion rips the heart out of the city. The videos captured on smartphones look terrifyingly like the descriptions of 1917. The mushroom cloud, the shattered glass, the blood. The system is the villain, the machine. The machine is the logic that says efficiency is more important than safety. The logic that says secrecy is more important than transparency. The logic that says it hasn't happened yet, so it won't happen today. The Mont Blanc was a creature of the war machine. It was built to feed the guns of Europe. It was authorized by the Admiralty. It was loaded by the Ministry of War. It was a necessary risk, they said, a calculated gamble. But the people who paid the price for that gamble were not the generals in London or the politicians in Ottawa. They were the telegraph operators, the school children, the dock workers, and the sailors. We live in a world built on these gambles. Every day, trains carrying chlorine gas pass through our cities. Pipelines carrying crude oil run under our rivers. Ships carrying liquid natural gas, floating thermos bottles with the explosive potential of a small nuclear bomb, dock in our harbors. We trust the system. We trust the regulations. We trust that the pilot knows the channel, that the red flag is flying, that the valve is closed. But the story of the Mont Blanc whispers a warning. It tells us that systems fail, that people make mistakes, that rules are broken, and that when the chemistry is volatile enough, nature does not care about your permits or your protocols. Or nature only cares about energy, and energy always finds a way out. There is a final element to this story, one that is often overlooked in the technical analysis. It is the element of secrecy. The Mont Blanc died because she was hiding. If she had flown the red flag, the IMO might have given her a wider berth. If the harbourmaster had known the true extent of her cargo, he might have closed the port. If the people of Halifax had known what was sitting in the Narrows, they might have evacuated the waterfront when the smoke appeared. But the war demanded silence. Loose lips sink ships, the posters said, but in this case, tight lips sank a city. The secrecy was a weapon. It turned the citizens of Halifax into collateral damage before the fuse was even lit. They were kept in the dark to protect them from the enemy, but the darkness itself became the danger. It forces us to ask, what do we not know today? What cargoes are moving through our cities right now, unmarked, unheralded, safe because the paperwork says so? The legacy of the Mont Blanc is the realization that in an industrial society, we are all sailors on the same ship. We are all reliant on the competence of strangers. We are all living downstream from the potential for catastrophe. And so, we return to the water. Let us go back one last time, not to the explosion, but to the moment before. The rowboat is drifting toward the Dartmouth shore. Captain Lemedic and pilot Mackie are huddled in the stern. The air is cold. The smell of benzol is replaced by the smell of burning tar and wood. They stop rowing. They have reached the shore. They climb out onto the rocks, their boots slipping on the icy seaweed. They turn back to look at the ship. It is a magnificent, terrifying sight. The Mont Blanc is a pyre. The flames are reaching up, twisting, consuming the rigging. The smoke is a dark bruise against the blue sky. They know what is about to happen. They are the only ones who know. They stand there, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the terrible, crushing anticipation. They are waiting for the physics to catch up with the reality. They look at the city on the opposite shore. They see the tiny figures of people watching. They see the tramcars moving along the waterfront. They see the smoke rising from the chimneys of the houses. It is a picture of life, of a Tuesday morning, of a world that makes sense. And the sailors know that in the blink of an eye, that world will vanish. They want to look away, but they cannot. They are witnesses. They are the priests of this terrible sacrament. And then, the deck of the Mont-Blanc heaves. The steel expands. The white light begins to bleed through the cracks in the hull. The captain closes his eyes. The pilot bows his head. The sound of the harbor, the seagulls, the distant whistles, the lapping water, fades away. There is a heartbeat of absolute silence, a pause in the rhythm of the universe. And then, the screen goes black. The audio cuts to a low, resonant hum, the sound of underwater pressure. No explosion sound effect, just the hum. The Mont Blanc is gone, but the echo is still traveling. It moves through the water, through the stone, through the generations. It reminds us that the line between a quiet morning and the end of the world is thinner than a sheet of steel. It reminds us to look at the ships in the harbor, to ask what they carry, to demand the truth. And to remember the men who rowed away, screaming a warning that no one understood, until the sky turned white. The hum fades into the sound of a single ship's whistle, distant and mournful, echoing in the fog.